Yeah, today, good afternoon everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the bony pelvis. In this lecture, we will be covering like the bones which forms the pelvis and also the subdivisions of the pelvis, and also we'll be seeing the floor which is being formed by the pelvis and also the perineal region, especially in females, like what are the muscles which are involved in it, and along with that I will also go through the dimensions of the pelvis, like what are the dimensions of the inlet and also the outlet, and also what are the angles which they are formed. So all these details will be covered today. So let us start with this pelvis. So pelvis is formed by basically few important bones, and the first most important bone which forms the major component of this pelvis is the hip bone, right? So hip bone, otherwise called as the innominate bone. So this pelvis is formed by, you can see, two hip bones, okay, and also there is another important bone here which is seen over the posterior side, which is called as the sacrum. So this pelvis is formed by the union of this sacrum, hip bones, two hip bones, one sacrum, and also there is one other small bone at the inferior end over the posterior side called as the coccyx. So these are the bones which forms the pelvis. So within these bones you can see that anteriorly these two hip bones, that is, like, hip bone is composed of three divisions called as the ilium, and the posterior part called as the ischium, and the pubis, right? So if you take this pubis, anteriorly this pubis, though both the pubic bones, they join together or they articulate together to form a joint called as the pubic symphysis, okay, or the symphysis pubis. And this pubic symphysis is a secondary cartilaginous joint, and there is a small arch-like structure which is formed underneath this one called as the pubic arch or the subpubic angle, okay. And this subpubic angle is useful in identifying the sex of the individual also, so which we will be seeing in the next further slides. So now you know about the symphysis pubis, which is the secondary cartilaginous joint which is seen over the anterior aspect of the pelvis, and posteriorly there are two joints, so two important joints which are formed, that is on each side, which are formed between the sacrum, that is the ala of the sacrum, and also the ilium. So this joint is nothing but called as the sacroiliac joint, okay. This is one sacroiliac joint. So on the other side, same thing, there is another sacroiliac joint. Along with this, there is another important joint which is present between the sacrum and also the coccyx. So the joint which is present between the sacrum and the coccyx is called as the sacrococcygeal joint. So these are all the joints which are present within the pelvic girdle or the pelvis. So again, just to make you understand, you can see this is the anterior superior iliac spine, and you can see the acetabular cavity or the acetabulum of the hip bone here, and now you can see two important foramina called as the obturator foramen, and these obturator foramen will be filled from inside with one muscle called as the obturator internus, and from the external side this obturator foramen will be covered by a fascia called as the obturator fascia. And along with this you can also see another bone here called as the ischium, and this is the pubic ramus, and of course the ilium here, and all these three together called as coxa, okay, the ilium, pubis and ischium together called as coxa. At the same time, you can, if you look at this sacrum, complete sacrum, so if at the level of the first sacral vertebrae there is an huge elevation which is protruding forward, and this elevation is called as the sacral promontory. This is called as the sacral promontory. Now let us go to the dimensions. So generally in male pelvis, generally you can see that the transverse diameter is little bit longer than larger than the vertical diameter. That is nothing but this transverse diameter is around 13 centimeters and also 12 centimeters in the vertical plane. So the vertical plane extends from the sacral promontory to the pubic symphysis, that is the upper margin of the pubic symphysis, whereas this 13 centimeters transverse diameter is the largest diameter which is present within the pelvis. And now you can see another one in case of female pelvis, that is, you can see that this is 12.5 centimeters vertical diameter and 11 centimeters in transverse diameter, which is again from the sacral promontory to the pubic symphysis. Now I just wanted to show you a few other diameters. So vertically it is like from the posteriorly, this is carried from the base of the sacrum to the sacral promontory. So this length is generally 11 centimeters anteriorly or anteroposteriorly, and transverse diameter, as I told you, it is 13 centimeters, okay, which is the widest one. And there is another diameter called as the oblique diameter, which is seen laterally, right? And this oblique diameter, if you take this one, this is the oblique diameter, and this is another important diameter, which is the narrowest part of the pelvis in case of females. That is the diameter between the two ischial spines, okay. So this intraspinous diameter, that is a blue colored line, is the narrowest part of the pelvic outlet. This diameter is present between the two ischial spines, and therefore it is an important landmark. Now coming to the openings of the pelvis. So pelvis has got two openings. One is present over the superior surface called as the inlet of the pelvis or the pelvic inlet, and one over the inferior part called as the pelvic outlet. So the pelvic inlet or the anterior part, it is a space which is enclosed by the pelvic brim. So the pelvic outlet is nothing but it is an opening which is bounded by the coccyx and also the ischial spines. You can see the ischial spines and the ischial tuberosities, right? So this is the pelvic outlet. In lateral view also you can see the pelvic outlet here, and also the pelvic inlet here, which is called as the pelvic brim. So what is this pelvic brim? So pelvic brim is nothing but, see, you can see an green colored, red and blue and purple colored line here, an arch. So this is nothing but the pelvic inlet or the superior aperture of the pelvis, or otherwise you can also call it as the pelvic brim. So pelvic brim is formed by various structures, like various aligned structures which together form an arc-like structure, like a rounded structure or an oval structure. So how this pelvic brim is formed? If you take this one, this is the first sacral vertebra. This is the first sacral vertebra, and as you know, there is an sacral promontory elevation called as the sacral promontory over this first sacral vertebra, right? At the same time, you can also see other things. These are nothing but the ala of the sacrum, okay. Within the ala of the sacrum, you can see the anterior margins or the anterior soft margin of the ala of the sacrum. It can be clearly made out, okay. This can be clearly made out, and also from here, once you enter the ilium, so the medial part of the lower part of the iliac bone also has got a border, right? So this border is nothing but called as arcuate line, okay. This arcuate line, and also the ala of the sacrum, and this arcuate line extends only up to the iliopubic eminence. Once the iliopubic eminence starts here, from here you will be seeing the pecten pubis and also the pubic crest, okay. This blue colored is the pecten pubis and purple one is the pubic crest. In this way, the ala of the sacrum, the arcuate line, the pecten pubis and also the pubic crest on either side together form a brim-like structure called as the linea terminalis. This structure is called as the linea terminalis. Hence, the linea terminalis consists of the pubic crest with the purple color, and then the blue colored pecten pubis, then the red colored arcuate line, and now we can see the anterior soft margins of the ala of the sacrum, and finally the yellow colored part, that is the sacral promontory. These are all the structures which together forms the inlet of the pelvis or the superior aperture of the pelvis, or otherwise you can also call it as the that is the pelvic brim. So with this, why it is this demarcation is present is because we are considering the whole like hip bones together as a pelvic girdle, right? But within this pelvic girdle, why this linea terminalis and the pelvic brim is present? Because the structures which are the structure or the part of the pelvis which is present above this pelvic brim is called as the greater pelvis or the false pelvis, and this greater pelvis or the false pelvis forms the posterior part of the abdominal wall. Okay, so it forms a part of the posterior abdominal wall, and the part which is present below this pelvic brim or the inlet of the pelvis is called as the true pelvis, which contains the pelvic viscera. So this is the difference between the true pelvis and the false pelvis, and this difference can be made with the help of this pelvic brim, or otherwise called as the superior aperture of the pelvis. So within this one, along with this, you can also see various other parts of the pelvic cavity. Okay, you can see this pubic tubercle here, and this is the pubic symphysis, and this is the pubic crest, and you can see the pecten pubis here and the arcuate line, right? So now let us move further. So till now we have seen the inlet of the pelvis, that is the brim or the pelvic brim we have seen. Now coming to the outlet of the pelvis. So this is the superior part of the pelvis, and this is the inferior part of the pelvis. If you take the inferior part of the pelvis, this inferior part of the pelvis extends between the tip of the coccyx to the lower margin of the pubic symphysis. Okay, the outlet of the pelvis will extend from the tip of the coccyx to the lower margin of the pubic symphysis. And this outlet is bounded by, you can see one big ligament here called as the sacrotuberous ligament. Okay, now the tip of the coccyx. Okay, and also other bones, that is the ischial tuberosity and the ischial spines. So these are all the components which forms the outlet of the pelvis. So along with this sacrotuberous ligament, which this sacrotuberous ligament basically extends from the sacrum towards the ischial tuberosity. So hence it is called as the sacrotuberous ligament. But there is another ligament which starts from the sacrum, but it goes towards the ischial spine. So this ligament is called as the sacrospinous ligament. In this way, this sacrospinous ligament and the sacrotuberous ligament divides the greater sciatic notch and the lesser sciatic notch into the greater sciatic foramen, and this is the greater sciatic foramen and the lesser sciatic foramen. Okay, so you can see here, this is the lesser sciatic foramen. So these are the two foramens which are being formed with the help of these two ligaments. Along this, you can also see the posterior sacroiliac ligament, and you can see the greater sciatic foramen. This is the sacrospinous ligament, this is the lesser sciatic foramen, and you can see the sacrotuberous ligament, and now you can see the ischiopubic ramus which is seen here. And as I told you in the beginning, this is the subpubic angle, and this is the obturator foramen, and you can see again the ischial tuberosity and the proper ischium bone, and this is the pubic bone, and you can see the ischial spine, and again same thing. And of course this large bone is nothing but the ilium. Okay, and the posterior superior iliac spine you can be seeing here, this region, and also this is the sacrum. So these are all the regions which can be identified in the posterior view. In this way, this pelvis has got an inlet or the pelvic brim and an outlet. So now let us see the orientation of the pelvis. Generally, while keeping the pelvis in anatomical position, please remember that the anterior superior iliac spine on either side and the pubic symphysis with the pubic tubercles, they all lie in one same coronal plane. So they lie in a single coronal plane. So whenever you are holding a pelvis in anatomical position, please remember that they should be oriented in such a way that the anterior superior iliac spines and the pubic tubercles or the pubic symphysis should lie or should align in the same coronal plane. And if you hold it like this, you can see various changes here. So if you take the pubic symphysis here, so now the body of the pubic rami, so this is the body of the pubic symphysis. Here in this region, if you hold in this position, the pubic surface of the pubic symphysis, the pelvic surface of the pubic symphysis here is facing backwards and upwards. It is facing backwards and upwards, while the anterior surface is facing forwards and completely downwards. Okay, the anterior surface of this pubic symphysis is facing anterior, this is facing forwards and completely downwards. So this is the orientation of this pelvis. In this orientation, the inlet of the pelvis makes an angle of approximately 50 to 60 degrees with the horizontal line, while the outlet of the pelvis also makes an angle of approximately 15 degrees with the horizontal plane. So this is the orientation of the pelvis, and in this orientation you can see this is the sacral canal, where in this sacral canal it will be almost facing upwards. Okay, it will be almost facing upwards. So this is the orientation of the pelvis. In this orientation, you can see that the pelvis, that is the cavity of the pelvis, will be in the form of a J. So letter J. So it is almost a J-shaped pelvic cavity. So in this J-shaped pelvic cavity, you can see that the upper part of this pelvic cavity will be facing backwards, okay, backwards and downwards. The upper part initially facing backwards and downwards, then in the lower part it will be facing downwards and forwards. So upper part is backwards and downwards. The upper part is backwards and downwards, whereas the lower part is downwards and forwards, right? So this, in this way, it forms an approximate J shape. Now coming to the orientation of this pelvis, it is the correct position of the bony pelvis related to the trunk, that is in anatomical position. So the anterior superior iliac spine and the pubic tubercles lie in the same vertical plane, and also the coccyx is in the same horizontal plane as the upper margin of the pubic symphysis. Okay. So the coccyx will be lying in the will be parallel to the upper margin of the pubic symphysis, and now the axis of the pelvic cavity running through the central point of inlet. Now the outlet almost parallels the curvature of the sacrum, and in this position the anterior surface of the sacrum is directed forwards and downwards, while the pelvic surface of the pubic symphysis faces upwards and backwards. It's nothing but tilting. Okay. So this is the orientation of the pelvis. Now coming to the next important structures called as the pelvic floor. So what is this use of this pelvic floor? This pelvic floor, or otherwise called as the pelvic diaphragm. This pelvic diaphragm is useful in separating the cavity of the true pelvis or the lesser pelvis from the perineal region. So as you know very well, the perineal region contains the structures or the apertures of the excretory system and the reproductive system. So this pelvic diaphragm will separate, or the pelvic floor will separate the perineal cavity from this pelvic cavity. So what are the muscles which are forming this pelvic floor or the pelvic diaphragm are, you can see one most important muscle called as the piriformis muscle. So this piriformis takes its origin from the sacrum and it goes through the lesser sciatic foramen, where it will fill the lesser sciatic foramen. And in front of this you can also see the other muscle which is starting from the spines of the ischium, that is the ischio-coccygeus, and now other big muscle called as the levator ani muscle. Okay, so this complete sheet is formed by the levator ani and also coccygeus. Ischio-coccygeus is otherwise called as the coccygeus muscle. Please remember that. So these are all the muscles which are involved in the formation of the pelvic diaphragm. So within this pelvic diaphragm, along with these muscles, this pelvic diaphragm is traversed by few structures called as the opening of the anal canal called as the anal hiatus, and also there is another important opening called as the urogenital hiatus. So these are the two important structures. But at the same time you can see there is one muscle which is seen here. So this muscle, what it has done is like it has completely covered the obturator foramen. So this muscle is the obturator internus muscle, and this obturator internus muscle along with its fascia covers from here, and from the outer side also there is another fascia called as the obturator fascia, which will completely enclose the obturator foramen. Now along with this you can also see this levator ani is formed by pubococcygeus and also iliococcygeus muscles. Okay, iliococcygeus and the pubococcygeus muscles, and in the most anterior part there is one important muscle here. You can see this one. This is a muscle is called as the puborectalis muscle. Okay, puborectalis muscle. In this way all these muscles will form the floor of the pelvis. Now let us move further forward in the lateral section of the pelvis. You can see this is the piriformis muscle which is coming from the sacrum and it is passing through this foramina, right? At the same time you can see the obturator foramen is completely closed by the help of this obturator internus muscle. Okay, so now you can see this is the lesser sciatic foramen and the greater sciatic foramen, which is completely covered by the piriformis muscle, and you can also see the sacral promontory here, right? And this whole part is the greater sciatic foramen which is been occupied by the piriformis muscle. Along with this you can see the part of the ischial bone, and also here there is a small foramen left out for the passage of the nerves, so called as the obturator foramen, and this is the superior pubic ramus, and you can see the inferior pubic ramus, and you can see the ischial tuberosity here, right? So these are all the structures which are seen in the pelvis, which forms the floor of the pelvic cavity. And also this, along with this floor, I just wanted to show you there is another structure which is seen from the under surface, that is from the inferior surface of the pelvic region. So from the inferior surface, if you look at it from the inferior surface, you will be seeing lot of structures. Especially I have taken the female pelvis in order to show the perineal region, how it will be. So if you take the inferior surface, that is the outlet of the pelvis, here it is being also covered by the perineal region, that is the perineal muscles. So what are the perineal muscles? Especially what you have to see is like, this is nothing but the bulbococcygeus muscle which is seen here, okay. And also this bulbococcygeus muscle, it will be covering one gland, okay, that is nothing but the vesicle, that is I'm not remembering that, but okay, bulbococcygeus muscle, this is nothing but the vestibule of the vagina, right? So this is nothing but the vestibules, bulb of the vestibules, and this is the complete central vestibule of the female pelvis. Within this vestibule, okay, bulbs of these things which you are seeing over the lateral sides, two bulbs, these are nothing but the bulb of the vestibule, and this is the central region which is called as the vestibule. So in this vestibule, anteriorly this vestibule is being traversed by the urethra of the female urinary region, and also posteriorly it is being traversed by the vaginal opening. So within this vestibule, anteriorly there is the opening of the urethra, while posteriorly there is the opening of the vagina. And also within this bulb of the vestibules, posterior to this region, here you will be seeing two important glands called as the bulbourethral glands or the glands of Bartholin. Okay, so these are nothing but in this region you will be seeing the Bartholin glands. And also you will be seeing one muscle over the lateral aspects, that is superiorly here over the lateral aspect. This muscle is nothing but the ischiocavernosus muscle. This ischiocavernosus muscle is present laterally on either side, and it is bonded to the margin of the outlet of the pelvis. And also in the mid region, it is also being supported by two important muscles called as the superficial and deep perineal muscles. So these are nothing but the superficial and the deep perineal muscles which will be seen here. And in the posterior quadrant, you will be especially seeing an opening called as the anal opening or the anal hiatus, which is being bounded by one important sphincter called as the external anal sphincter. Okay. And the rest of the region here, it is being covered by the levator ani muscle. So this is all the details of the perineum in case of the female pelvis. And now coming to these structures which are seen in the lesser pelvis or the true pelvis. So in the lesser pelvis, you will be seeing the most important structures in the male are nothing but the urinary bladder, which is most anterior one, and then you can also see the coils of the sigmoid colon and the rectum here. And you can see, of course, this one small muscular tube which is going called as the ureter, right? So along with this, you also, in case of males, you will be seeing another important gland called as the prostate gland. But while in case of females, you will be seeing here, this is the anteriormost part which is occupied by the urinary bladder, followed by now posteriorly along the sacral promontory. You can see this is the sacral bone. Along the sacrum, you can see the coils of sigmoid colon and also the rectum which is going down, and in between this rectum and the urinary bladder, now you can see the female reproductive organs, that is the uterus, right? So this is the uterus. Along with this, you can also see another important vessels coming here. They are nothing but the internal iliac, common iliac artery, which will be dividing into the internal iliac artery and also the external iliac artery. So these are the main important structures which are seen here. Now coming to the other structures which crosses the pelvic brim. So there are few other structures which crosses the pelvic brim. So among these few structures which cross the pelvic brim, the most important structures are the obturator nerve and also the sympathetic chain, the iliolumbar plexus, and also you can see the internal iliac artery also crosses the pelvic brim. You can see this is the pelvic brim, and also you can see the inferior gluteal artery, middle rectal artery, and also especially the superior rectal artery also will cross this soft part of, that is the brim of the pelvis. And in case of females, along with this, you can also see other structures are nothing but the urinary bladder, the ovaries, the uterine tubes, the ureters, and also the uterus. So in case of males, this pelvis will be occupied by the urinary bladder, prostate, and also the rectum. So these are all the structures which are present in the pelvis, and also these are the details of the structures which will be crossing the brim of the pelvis. So with this, the topic, the bony pelvis, is completed. In the next class session, I will be showing you in detail about the details of this like hemisection of the male pelvis and the female pelvis. And please remember, there is also like one important structure which I have forgotten to tell you. So this region also is contains, in the lesser pelvis also contains one important structure called as the root of the sigmoid colon. So the root of the sigmoid colon basically extends from the S3, that is the third sacral vertebra, and it extends upwards. So within this pelvis, we will also see the root of the sigmoid colon, which extends up to the S3 vertebra. So in this way, all these structures are related to the lesser pelvis or the true pelvis. And again, I just wanted to go back to show you the openings. So I think now it's very clear about the pelvic opening, that is the pelvic inlet or the pelvic brim, called as the superior aperture of the pelvis, and also the inferior aperture or the pelvic outlet, what are its dimensions and everything. You please go through this one. And also please remember, in this sagittal section, it is a very easy one. You can see this, the region which is present above this arrow is nothing but the false pelvis or the greater pelvis, and the region which is present below this line, that is the pelvic brim, is called as a true pelvis or the lesser pelvis. And only the lesser pelvis or the true pelvis is the original one, which will contain the pelvic viscera. And there are few other structures which crosses the pelvis. So the important structures which cross the pelvis are, one is most important structures, especially in case of like males and females. In case of males, there is one structure here which I am showing you. This is nothing but the urinary bladder. So when the bladder is empty, it completely lies within the lesser pelvis, that is, which lies within the true pelvis. But when there is a distension of the bladder with urine, with the collection of urine, then this bladder can extend up to the greater pelvis or the false pelvis into the abdominal region. So this is one of the organ where when it is empty, it belongs to the lesser pelvis, but when it is full and distended with the collection of urine, it will be extending into the greater or the false pelvis. And also there is another important structure. Basically, in non-gravid females, this will be completely in the lesser pelvis, but this uterus, the organ called as the uterus of the female reproductive system, when during pregnancy, it will also extend into the greater pelvis. So these are the only two structures where when they are non-functional, they will be in the lesser pelvis, but when they are functional, especially in case of bladder, when it is filled with urine, then they extend into the false pelvis. So with this, I complete this lecture, and thank you.